than this. Britain's got to prepare for the war. It's going to be great, though. Who doesn't love a war?
That's according to a government review of threats to national security, which says that for the first time in many years, the UK must now be ready for a wartime scenario in its homeland.
When I was a kid, it was polite to tell people who the war was going to be against. Now, according to this report in The Guardian, which is a legacy media newspaper in Britain, it's a kind of sort of sense of cyber warfare and terrorism. Listen, Britain needs to prepare for the possibility of being attacked on its own soil, the government has warned in its security strategy, laying out in stark terms the range of threats ministers say the UK now face. Russia's military build-up and Iran's increasing attacks on dissidents abroad mean the country could soon find itself involved in a domestic war. So it could be Russia, could be Iran. Seems to me like propaganda. Remember, we're just getting into this peculiar phase in contemporary life where we have to consider these categories of misinformation and disinformation. How do you categorize this? A nefarious, non-specific threat of military action. Be afraid is almost the opposite of the message of God. Peace be with you. Be not afraid. Be afraid. You should be afraid. There could be a war. Who is it against? Mosquito drones? Warring echoes recent comments from Mark Rutte, the NATO Secretary-General, that without a major increase in defence spending, British people better learn to speak Russian. For the first time in many years, we have to actively prepare for the possibility of the UK homeland coming under direct threat, potentially in a wartime scenario. Now, I'd like to know if Vladimir Putin said anything like, we're going to invade Britain, we've got a plan to take over Britain. Do you notice that with wars these days, there's very seldom a clear agenda, is there? We're just going to go to Afghanistan, we're going to achieve this, and then we're going to be out. All credit in, I suppose, this instance to Donald Trump, who says we're going to take out some nuclear reactors and then that'll be the end of it. So far, my prayer is that that's what he's delivered. Now, I'm certainly not suggesting that Donald Trump is perfect, but in his clarity and explicitness, there are some reassurances to be gleaned rather than a kind of generalized war against Iran or maybe Russia or maybe a cyber threat, or it could be germs. In a way, this seems to me to be one of those kind of convergences of interest that George Carlin always claimed meant that we didn't require conspiracy.
You don't need a formal conspiracy.
Right.
When interests converge, these people went to the same universities and fraternities, they're on the same boards of directors, they're on the same country clubs, they have like interests, they don't need to call a meeting, they know what's good for them.
The interests of the arms industry, the interests of NATO, the interests of Keir Starmer all point towards war. So, hey, why not have one? The report strikes a very different tone from the last major security review, which was undertaken by Boris Johnson's government 4 years ago. That report was published in the midst of a COVID pandemic and talked at length about pandemic resilience and vaccine manufacturing, both of which only get a single mention this time. COVID didn't work. Let's try war.
Here at home, this is a stark warning in the national security strategy.
Yes, the government today published this long-awaited strategy which spells out very starkly not just the global threats, but also the threats to the homeland. It talks, like you said, about how for the first time in many years, the UK needs to actively prepare for the possibility of a threat on the home front, potentially even in a wartime scenario.
Why are everyone so pleased about this war? Why are all the people in the news sort of smiling their way through the war? Have you ever been near a war? Have you even watched a relatively good documentary or film about the war? Do you know people that are in the military? People that I speak to around here, war veterans, in general seem to think that armed conflict is a pretty appalling scenario. We're talking in the UK about conscription now, so we're not even talking about professional soldiers who join the military with some expectation that active combat and certainly conflict has to be countenanced as potentially part of their future. We're talking now about people being sort of like plucked by lottery or forced. Conscripted means mandated to fight in a war. That's different. If you have a strong ideology and a strong sense of what your nation is, then let's fight. I mean, I'll fight, I'll kill and die for my children. I'll kill and die for my wife. I'll kill and die for my faith. I'll kill and die for Jesus Christ. But Britain? Come on. What is Britain now? What does it mean to you? Is this something you're going to die for? Do you not get the sense that your government, your media, your culture hates you? Even under the feudal system that Britain has, to a degree, left behind, it would be assumed that the lord of the manor would lead the charge, would train the peasantry, would stand at the forefront against invading France or Scotland or whoever. Now, you know how it works. The elites will be neatly ensconced in technological and immaculate bunkers, while young people, poor people of all religions and races will be fodder for the machinery of Keir Starmer's popularity. And that's a machine that might take a lot of feeding.
It doesn't go on to spell out what kind of threat they're talking about, but it also talks about how the need... the summit was like, this is the press area and there's people walking past. I apologise.
The sly, carrying on.
But they also talk about they focus on national resilience and talk about how this is a fundamental change in culture. It really is an echo of the Cold War era, where the UK and the rest of European NATO allies had not just much larger armed forces with greater capacity to fight in a high-intensity war with reserves ready to come in behind the front lines.
Britain can't have a war. Britain doesn't have an identity. Britain doesn't have a purpose. Britain doesn't have any social cohesion. You ask anyone in Britain, are they happy with their government? Do they like Keir Starmer? In general, you are going to hear a resounding no. If you ask British people, what does Britain stand for now? What does Britain mean? Is this the Britain of the Beatles, of Shakespeare, of Queen Elizabeth II, of Winston Churchill? Is this the Britain of fairness, of Jesus Christ, of unity, coming together, bravery, boldness, standing up against the Nazis, ingenuity, design, style, flair? The 60s, man, the 90s, Blur, Oasis. No, this is a broken Britain, a Britain in despair and in despondency. Is there anyone who would even believe it? If there were terrorist attacks in London, would you believe what the media and government told you about it? If the hand of the government is placed on the shoulder of your son and daughter and says, I demand their life, are you going to hand it over as happily as you hand over your taxes? I don't think so. I don't think Britain's in a position to have a war. I think Britain's at war already with itself, and it's a war that we, the people of Britain, have to win. And it ain't against Vladimir Putin, it's against the current government. But that's just what I think. Why don't you let me know what you think in the comments and chat? Let me know if you want to die for this ideology. Let me know if you believe in the religion they're peddling. What colour's your wee-wee? Be honest. It's Lella, isn't it? Filthy yellow, unless you're on the methylene blue. If you have fielder greens like me, you will look at your wee-wee and you'll think, I should be like Madonna in the good old 80s and drink this stuff right back down. It's so full of delicious nutrients. And this being 4th of July, there is a firework sale. Baby, you're a firework. Let's get 25% off this product right now. Get Lean, the #1 weight loss supplement packed with natural studied ingredients. No injections like a Zempiec. You don't want in Zempiec right up your back passage, do you? What if you get addicted to it? No. Fielder Greens Lean. Without the injections, get yourself thin and glorious. I'm on it. I've got these glorious abs like Bob Villain. I've got abs like Bob Villain, baby. Try Fielder Greens, the superfood drink so powerful they guarantee your doctor will notice your boosted health or your money back. It's all due to delicious Fielder Greens. Collagen peptides are another fan favourite for glowing skin and hair. Have you noticed my skin? Have you noticed my hair? Collagen peptides. They're oozing out of every pore. From weight loss to wellness, Brickhouse Nutrition has it all. And our listeners can't stop raving. This sale is huge, but it's only here for a few days and products will sell out. Don't wait. Head to brickhousenutrition.com and use Fireworks 25 for 25% off. Let's go big this 4th of July. brickhousenutrition.com. Stock up now.
But also a resilient population that was prepared for war. And the government is saying as part of this strategy that there are going to be annual exercises to test the whole of society's preparedness.
It's from Keir Starmer. Right, we're going to have annual exercises to test the readiness of all the society for war. Now, start this way. I'll be in my underpants, get some Ukrainian and Romanian lads around here and firebomb me till I fart.
We are facing daily challenges on the home front. So whether that's cyber attacks, which are very, very frequent and very, very serious.
I got cyber attacked by some Romanian lads and some Ukrainian model lads that happened to be on Grindr. I don't know why they cyber attacked me. I don't know what I've done to provoke them.
Whether that is a focus on energy security. We've seen from the Ukraine war that energy is weaponized by our adversaries.
Professional soldiers behind Keir Starmer, men of valour and honour. I wonder how they feel about being marched into a war by a class of people that don't understand their challenges or their beliefs and increasingly don't seem to respect them. Okay, and here's a piece about how, in general, war is used to galvanise populations. But can Keir Starmer galvanise a population by making things worse for people? Unpopular governments always retreat to grounds of lazy convenience. Instead of engaging in exercises of courage, they take refuge in obvious distractions, and there's no more obvious distraction than preparing for war against the phantom enemy. That is exactly where the government of Keir Starmer finds itself. Despite a mammoth majority and a dramatically diminished Tory opposition, the Prime Minister acts like a man permanently besieged. Perhaps he is permanently besieged. He certainly gets firebombed a lot. His inability to be unequivocal to questions of whether he will contest the next election suggests as much. The same cannot be said about his enthusiasm for the sword and sabre. There are monsters out there to battle, and Sir Keir is rising to the plate. Sensing this, the military mandarins, most prominently General Sir Roland Walker, head of the army, has been more than encouraging, seeing the need to ready the country for war by 2027. Given the military's perennial love affair with astrology, that state of readiness could only be achieved with a doubling of the army's fighting power and tripling it by 2030. Given that background, the UK Strategic Defence Review was commissioned in July 2024, led by former Labour Defence Secretary and NATO Secretary-General Lord George Robertson. The freshly released report promises a fat boon for the military-industrial complex. Like all efforts to encourage war, its narrative is that of supposedly making Britain safer. So this increased threat is likely to accompany an increased budget. You can decide for yourself whether the threat has increased or whether they're increasing the budget and therefore have to increase the threat. Starmer's introduction is almost grateful for the chance to out the bloodlusting enemy. In this new era for defence and security, when Russia is waging war on our continent and probing our defences at home, we must meet the danger head on. The placing of noble Ukraine into the warming fraternity of Europe enables a civilizational twist to be made. The Russian military efforts in Ukraine are not specific to a murderous family affair and historical anxieties, but directed against all Europeans. That's amazing. By claiming that Ukraine is part of Europe rather than part of Russia and the former Soviet Union, you can make claims that Europe is being attacked. That's extraordinary. I'm obviously not qualified to talk about the different ethnicities within the region of Ukraine and Russia, but I know that there are a lot of Russian speakers in Ukraine. I know there was a successful coup in 2014. I know that it's a complex history. And what I also know is if you make the claim that Ukraine is part of Russia and Russia is attacking Europe, you're doing that for a very deliberate military and financial reason.
And of course, you've seen state actions by Iran and Russia in the United Kingdom. We have to guard properly against those threats, and we will do so.
Keir Starmer is not a person who can galvanise the national spirit. In the time that he's been in government, there's been the Southport murder of them teenagers, the mishandling of that migration crisis, political losses, embarrassment in the House, embarrassment in by-elections, embarrassment in the media, senseless, endless rumours about his private life, frankly, which don't interest me other than as a potential indication of disingenuity and dishonesty. This is a time where we should be preparing for peace and a deep review and examination of what Britain means. If we're going to have a Britain, then you have to listen to the British people when it comes to their borders. If you're going to have a Britain, you're going to have to work out what we stand for. If you have a Britain, you're going to have to review radically what our communities mean and what the expectation is of the participants of each community. Every one of us, how are we going to marry together communities that these days seem to be increasingly hostile? How do we solve the challenge that multiculturalism has presented us with? A formerly Christian country made up of Celts and Angles and Roman descendants and Norman descendants is now undergoing a revision where it must happily incorporate a Muslim population, a Sikh population, and those that contributed so gloriously through Windrush. How do we find a new identity as British people together? There's got to be a serious conversation, and I don't think it's a conversation to be afraid in a general and vague way about something. Don't worry, we've already done a deal on your behalf with Moderna and Pfizer. Look at what's happening now. Deepening relationships with arms companies, deepening relationships with bureaucratic bodies, whether that's the relationships and you.
A psychic who was employed by the CIA to remote view the dark side of the moon. Specifically, to look for he had psychic potential. When he got older, he wanted to explore this talent, so he began volunteering for experiments in ESP. At first, researchers tested Swan to see if he could influence plants with mental activity or alter the temperature of an environment using his mind. And Swan was successful enough that more and more scientists became interested in him. But it was a few years later where Ingo Swann would find his specialty. In the early 1970s, Swann was part of a study for the American Society of Psychical Research, and this study involved Swann sitting in a chair and attempting to project his consciousness into sealed boxes which contained symbols that Swan would try to read. During one experiment, he was asked to see what he saw inside of a box, and Swan said he saw nothing, just darkness. The researcher was disappointed and said, "Oh, that's too bad. Let's try something else." Swan said, "No, I see darkness because the light bulb inside the box is burnt out." The researcher was puzzled. He walked over to the box, opened it, and sure enough, the light was out, and a star was born. Ingo Swan's success in these early experiments got the attention of the Stanford Research Institute. You might remember the SRI from our Project Stargate video, which I'll link below. SRI had been remote viewing places around the world for years, but once they found Ingo Swan, who was extremely successful at this, they wondered if he could remote view other places in the solar system. There was an experiment in 1973 where Ingo Swan was asked to project his consciousness to the planet Jupiter. At first, Swan rejected the idea. Ingo Swan never wanted to remote view anything that couldn't be confirmed. There were plenty of frauds who claimed to have psychic abilities, and Swan valued his reputation. He didn't see any value in going to Jupiter if his observations couldn't be confirmed. But the researchers at SRI told Swan Jupiter was chosen because NASA had probes on the way there right now. So Swan agreed. And he made a lot of observations about Jupiter that the Pioneer probes soon confirmed. He saw a hydrogen mantle, rotating storms like cyclones. He mentioned high infrared readings, the colors of the clouds, and ice crystals in the atmosphere.
The probes confirmed all this?
They did. Skeptics will say all these observations could be deduced, like, of course, Jupiter has violent storms, we can see them. Same with the color of clouds, infrared, and atmospheric ice crystals. Even if we can't see this stuff, we can deduce that they're there. But Swan saw something else, something new. He said he saw a ring around Jupiter, just like Saturn's ring. But Jupiter's ring, according to Swan, was much smaller than Saturn's and closer to the planet. He said it was made up of dust and tiny asteroids. This was not something we could see from Earth, or even assume was there.
Did the probes see the ring?
The Pioneer probes in 1973 and 1974 did not see a faint ring around Jupiter.
Oh.
But when Voyager 1 passed by Jupiter in 1979...
Tell me there was a ring.
There was a ring.
Yahtzee!
I am not this body in terms of consciousness, and consciousness can go places where the body cannot.
Ingo Swan was so accurate as a remote viewer that people began to take notice, specifically the United States government.
Of course.
In March 1975, Ingo Swan received a call at 3 a.m. He was told to go to Washington and visit the Museum of Natural History. There he should stand near the elephant in the central rotunda at noon. So he does. Right on schedule, a military-looking man approaches him and hands him a card. It reads, "Do not speak or ask questions. This is for our safety as well as yours. Please follow me." He's led to a car and seated next to another military-looking man, and in his book he calls these guys the twins. And twin number 2 hands him another card. It reads, "Please do not speak. We need to search you for listening devices." They do, and he's handed one final card. "We would like your help on a project suited to your talent. Are you comfortable in a helicopter?" Well, Swan takes a long moment, finally nods. The twins take the cards from Ingo Swan's hand, then a bag is placed over his head, and the car speeds away. Though Ingo Swan couldn't see, he felt that he was driven around in circles. Eventually, he's led from the car where he hears a helicopter spinning up. His face still shrouded, he's buckled in and flown to a location in or near Washington, D.C. When the helicopter lands, Swan is led to a quiet building and then into an elevator. The doors open and the bag is finally removed. Swan blinks his eyes, adjusting to the light. Then a kindly-looking man introduces himself as Mr. Axelrod. Ingo Swan is obviously nervous. When Mr. Axelrod sees this, he smiles, tells him not to worry, that he's in no danger, and offers him a cigar. Swan gladly takes one. It's his brand. The men go to an office, sit and enjoy a cigar where Mr. Axelrod makes a proposal. Axelrod says he represents a group who would like Swan to participate in a remote viewing project. For his effort, he would be paid $1,000 a day in cash, which in today's money is over $6,000 a day.
Inflation, huh?
Yep.
Are we going to talk about the Federal Reserve and what a scam it is?
Not in this video.
Audit the Fed!
Okay, settle down. So Ingo Swan really needs the money, but to get it, there are a few catches. First, he can't reveal any of this to anyone and can't speak of it for at least 10 years. The other catch is for the next few days, Swan isn't to leave the facility. He'll be provided with a comfortable room, TV, a gym, swimming pool, and anything he needs. But if he takes the job, he stays on site under constant surveillance. Now, Ingo Swan is quiet for a while. As crazy as the past few years have been, he's never been through anything like this. Mysterious calls in the middle of the night, clandestine meetings, subterranean facilities, and now a kind but strange man offers him a lot of cash for an unknown mission. Axelrod sees Swan processing all of this and finally asks if he agrees to the terms. Swan nods that he does. Axelrod puts out his cigar, shakes Swan's hand, and says, "Good, get some rest. Tomorrow, we begin."
And it has very distinct features of a satellite dish. It's got the dish itself, the crater shape. It's got a long spike that appears to come out of the middle. All sorts of stuff that looks exactly like a satellite dish on Earth looks.
The next morning, Axelrod tells Ingo Swan that he'll be remote viewing the moon. And Swan is confused by this, but Axelrod reminds him,
No questions.
right. And Swan is given a list of coordinates and goes through them one by one. Some locations, he doesn't see anything, but others he was able to view large cliffs, see craters, dunes of white powder, all the things you'd expect to see on the moon. Finally, Swan comes across something interesting and confusing. He describes seeing tracks on the surface, tracks that seem to have been made by tractors or some kind of machinery. He sees patterns that look like they were made by wind, even though the moon has no atmosphere. Supposedly. Swan gets the sense that there is atmosphere there. Then Swan moves into a crater which is filled with a green haze. Something is generating light. And Swan notes that the light is diffused. And diffused light isn't possible on the moon. You need an atmosphere to scatter the light. So if it's not the atmosphere, what is it? He moves closer to the light. Swan sees something that looks like an airfield. He describes large structures like hangars, roads,